Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am in the beautiful Carneros Valley, the Napa side of it, at Bouchaine Vineyards with winemaker and general manager Chris Kajani. Chris, welcome, and tell us about Bouchaine and where we are.
Oh, thank you, Allison. I'm so excited to do this with you. You are approximately 10 minutes south of the town of Napa. And if you stand on our vineyard terraces, you look right across the San Pablo Bay to the San Francisco Bay, and you can see the Salesforce Tower in the financial district of the city. You can see Mount Tamalpais, and you basically look 360 degrees at 8 different counties from this little terraced hill in the Napa side of the Carneros AVA.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit about Bouchaine Vineyards.
So Bouchaine was founded in 1981, but it's such a cool property. It was originally planted in the late 1800s, as a few properties were here in Carneros. Carneros, as you know, means the ram, and so there were a lot of sheep, but also a lot of agriculture, a lot of trading of goods and services, and gold. So Buckley Station Road that Bouchaine Vineyards is located on is where the railway came in from Northern California, bringing gold down. And parallel to us is Cuttings Wharf, which is where the ferry came in from San Francisco. So all the apples and produce, all of the lambs and other farm animals, in addition to gold, was traded here back in the 1800s. And Quincy Boonefly, and I'm not making that up, Quincy Boonefly originally planted the property in the mid to late 1800s. And if anyone's been to the Boonefly restaurant at the Carneros Resort, that's who it's named after.
Oh, very interesting. I see. So tell me a little bit about what type of wines you're producing here.
So it's a really cool story. Copelands, who own this property, are really the fourth owners of this land. And they found it in 1981. Mrs. Copeland really wanted to find something, as Mr. Copeland's family, him being a DuPont person, a DuPont family member, had spent a lot of time in France, a lot of time in Europe, and was raised with wine, and she wanted to find something that they could do together to continue that history. So she found this property when it was for sale by the Behringer brothers back in 1980-ish, let's call it. And Mrs. Copeland's history is incredibly interesting, and I'm sorry for the tangent, but her history is very interesting because she's Russian. And when she comes to Napa to look at vineyard properties, the first person she calls is Andrei Chelichev. Terrible at pronouncing that. Andrei Chelichev, the professor, as we know him, in Napa Valley, and one of the old school amazing winemakers of Napa Valley. And so he's Russian, she's Russian. So of course she calls him up and says, "Hey, can you look at this with me?" And he said, "Tatiana, you must plant Pinot Noir here. You must do it, right off the bay, all this cool climate, all this wind, all this breeze, you must do it." And so they purchased this semi-dilapidated spot back then and just put in loads of love, just tons and tons of time and investment. And they have such care for this place and such just deep, deep love for this site that at this point in time, we have multiple buildings, including a new hospitality center, and they ended up buying a little bit additional land. So right now there's 104 acres, and it's mostly planted to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. But at this point, we're making over 20 wines. So there's Gewürztraminer, Riesling. There's a beautiful, beautiful Phelps clone of Syrah that we actually got from Larry Hyde, originally from Hermitage. Wow. We also have Pinot Meunier, we have Pinot Gris, so it's a big cornucopia of grapes out here at this point.
And what's your total case production?
We float between 15 to 18,000 cases a year, just depending on Mother Nature.
And are your wines available across the country? Are they distributed? Are you direct to consumer, a combination?
It's a combination. We do a lot of direct to consumer, but there's enough wine that we do in estate Pinot and an estate Chardonnay that you will find in fine wine shops and restaurants across the country. We're not in every state because we really don't have that much wine, but you will certainly see it.
And if not, you can find it.
Exactly. On the website, bouchaine.com.
So, Chris, tell me, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Oh, such a great question. My dad went to the University of Kansas and was raised out there. And he's a nuclear engineer. He was a nuclear engineer. He's passed. But his first real job was at Mare Island out in Vallejo when it was a Navy base. And he was a civilian engineer working on nuclear subs. And he quickly moved from bourbon and branch water into Cabernet. And we lived in Napa Valley. And I just remember getting my license and him really pushing me to get it. And I thought it was so I could be the cool kid in high school that had a car and could drive my friends around to the roller rink. And instead it was so I could be the designated driver and drive him and my uncles around the valley. I don't know if you remember this, but Chimney Rock used to be an 18-hole golf course back in the day. And so I'd drop them off at Chimney Rock and I'd come back and pick them up after 18 holes and we would taste at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. We would taste at Martini.
When you say we, were you tasting?
When I was 21. Yes. But I remember having, my dad encouraged me to have wine with dinner and to try things. And so, he had collected a lot of Napa Valley wines from the 70s and 80s. And that's my first real memory of wine tasting.
I love it. So when you have a little more vivid memory, when you were actually drinking wine legally and all the wines you've been exposed to, was there one that was kind of an aha moment that shifted your mindset in some way, whether it was the wine that made you decide you wanted to make wine or made you look at wine a different way or focus on a variety?
I have a couple flashpoints. I remember the first time I tasted the Fay bottling from Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, and I was like, oh, I actually like wine. And I tried it a lot, but it hadn't hit that deep soul point in me. And that was the first wine that opened my eyes to how layered and just how delicious things could be. And we were having a fabulous day at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars with my dad, and so that's a really special memory. But in addition to that, I had a great uncle that lived in Spain, and I remember the first time I tried a Priorat, and a much leaner wine, a much more mineral-driven wine, almost a bit saline-y, and I just remember being really intrigued. This is delicious. I see why people drink a bottle of this. So those two are some of my earliest memories.
Yeah. So now if we were to come into your home and into your wine cellar, no matter what the size is, not making judgments here, but what would we find in there? What sort of wines fill that wine cellar?
It's really interesting. Instead of a cellar, I have a guest room. So there's an internal closet that's stacked from floor to ceiling, and there's not a lot of place to put your suitcase if you come see me, because there's an entire wall, a whole side of this one wall that is wine.
I think that's a good use of a closet.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard. When you get bit by the bug, you just keep seeing fun things to try. But I feel like because so much of what I do is a lot of Chardonnay and a lot of Pinot Noir, I certainly collect that, but there's a moment at the end of the day that you need a palate cleanser, and you need something that's just strips everything off your palate and resets you and gives you, that additional energy. And I feel like champagne does that for me, followed very closely by Riesling. So those are the two things that I probably have the most of.
And Riesling domestic and German and Austrian, or any particular region?
I love domestic Riesling, but there's a lot of German Riesling in there.
Mm-hmm. So was there a wine you've opened recently that drank really well?
Oh, wow. I had a really nice Agrapart champagne for Mother's Day that my husband was busy cooking, so I have to confess I drank most of the bottle myself. Sitting outside.
It was Mother's Day. It was your day to do that.
Mother's Day, and I was outside with no responsibilities, enjoying the summer weather, and so I would say that's my most current really fun wine I've drank.
Oh, wonderful. So, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
No, I'm moody. I'm moody in my food and I'm moody in my wine. And so sometimes you want something rich and dense, you want a Mourvedre, you want something dark and brooding. And then other times you want a Riesling, you want it light, you want it refreshing, you want it to take the enamel off your teeth, you want some acid, you want some energy and tension. So I think the perfect wine is whatever you're in the mood for.
And another potentially interesting question to ask, but what's your opinion on wine critics and scores?
I think people should dive into what they like. You know, as you dive into what you like, it's natural just to continue to expand and to try some new things in the vein of what you're already enjoying. And great wine shops are fabulous at helping you do that. And even restaurants and restaurant wine lists can be, phenomenal in helping you do that. Great sommeliers and great lists where you're like, hey, I like this. What else should I try? Or, hey, I'm in the mood for that. What sounds good? I think that there's a place for looking at numbers and saying, hey, well, there's a number on this. I should try it. Sure. Yeah, go for it. But everybody has their own path. And sometimes it's a recommendation from family, friends, or sommelier or a wine shop. Other times you're flipping through a magazine and the way that something's written up is really intriguing or compelling to you. And so jump on it, go for it.
So for you as a wine drinker, red, white, or rosé?
Champagne.
Well, I would next ask still or sparkling, but clearly champagne.
Yeah, we're just going to stick with champagne. All the rest of my answers are champagne.
Champagne. Okay, perfect. Okay, we're done. No. So, a lot of times, and champagne is such a perfect wine for food, but we always think about food and wine pairing. And, some of the wines you've described that you make, Pinot, Chard. I've got a bottle of Riesling in front of me. You drink a lot of that. A Von Gris Pinot Noir. Yeah, food-friendly wines. But how do you approach food and wine pairing? Do you think there are rules to follow? Do you believe in the white wine and fish, red wine and meat, Pinot with salmon? Or do you look at other tips that you can share in what you're doing? Or do you just not care and you just drink champagne?
Yes. But I have two philosophies on that. One is the same philosophy. And so if you have something buttery and rich and yummy, pair it with something buttery, rich, and yummy, and that can be absolutely fantastic. Or if you have something like duck, which is like gamey and sweet and just this beautiful umami in your mouth, pair that with something that can be a little gamey and have some sweet fruit behind it and have some of that umami character, like a really gorgeous Pinot Noir. But the flip side to that philosophy is more of like a yin-yang pairing, where you take something maybe that you put on the grill and then you pair it with something that's got a lot of tension and energy and freshness to it that really contrasts that we'll call it a grilled scallop. So now you don't have scallop in like this buttery, yummy seafood sauce, creme sauce, but you've got a scallop that you're just grilling and then pair it with like a bracing, like really pretty Riesling, or maybe even like a slightly richer but unoaked Chardonnay. And so the contrast to a grill with something really fresh can be really fun too.
Oh, you're making me hungry. So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste your wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
Oh my gosh, I love Carneros. I've been working with fruit from Carneros since 2004, my very first winemaking job at Paul Meyer. And when I started at Paul Meyer, they had just started a Pinot program. So I'm going to go on a tiny tangent here. When you drink young Cabernet, your mouth feels like it's in a bar fight. So you are being punched from the inside. It's tannic and it's amazing. It's deep and rich and gorgeous, but it's tannic and can be just feeling like literally you're being hit from the inside. And when you drink young Pinot Noir, it's just as gorgeous as it is aged. I mean, it's just all grace and layers, and it's just absolutely beautiful. A lot of early floral components and high-tone fruit, and it's so pretty. So I instantly fell in love, and I moved over to Sainsbury in 2006 and started focusing on Pinot Noir. I knew from the second I tasted it young, that's what I wanted to do. And so now here at Bouchaine, I've been doing this for longer than I wish to admit. And working with Pinot Noir from Carneros can be so fun. I'm staring at this rock collection I was showing you, and while people correctly associate Carneros with clay, there's also tons of ribbons of volcanic material from Mount Veeder washing down different soils off the hill out towards the bay. And also even way, way back in the day, the top of Atlas Peak is also an active volcano. And so that also deposited a lot of volcanic soil here. And so you get these crazy blocks with these ribbons of volcanic material through it that give you this really savory complexity and this beautiful umami mineral note that can make Pinot Noir here so fun and intriguing and really different. We have same clone, same rootstock, grown on different parts of this particular vineyard that show completely different aroma and flavor profiles. And so I love Carneros for all these different reasons and for these different complexities and layers of fruit that you find depending on where things are planted out here. I find it so fun. And the other thing that I would add, and I'm going to tease my friends that work up valley in Napa, traffic down here means you got stuck behind a tractor. This is still super chill, very relaxed, similar to how a lot of these different growing areas were 20, 30 years ago, where you just don't run into that many people. And I love the community out here. I love that it's a bit removed from some of the hubbub and traffic. And I love our neighbors. I love that, we run out of something and you just run up the road and grab it from a friend of yours. It's such a great community, and I really appreciate working out here.
I mean, even just getting here, it was just vineyard. It was a beautiful drive, but also isolated, and yet we're right at the base of Napa.
Exactly.
Here, so it's amazing. So if space aliens were to land on your property right now, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with?
Oh, it's such a great question. I love the whole UFO theory. If a UFO just dropped on top of our terraces,
right,
we would.
On the terraces.
I know.
I see exactly where they're going to land.
We would probably just run right out there with some of our Vin Gris, that's just a fancy name for a rosé of Pinot Noir. Only because it's such a crowd pleaser, and we would want to be extremely, extremely friendly to our UFO friends.
That's what I got welcomed with.
Exactly.
So you were just talking about how you've been in the Carneros region for a while now. You've spent, a good almost 20 years in this area. So you're really familiar with the terroir here and what's going on. Vintage to vintage, we know there's variation, but how much do you see as similar versus, grandiose differences down here? What do vintages tell you in Carneros?
As a winemaker, your job is to pick it apart and say, these cooler vintages are giving us this, these warmer vintages, challenge us with this. And yet, in general, the beauty of Carneros is you're right here on the San Pablo Bay. And as you saw pulling in, there's this amazing, fresh, clean, cool wind that blows off the bay. There's fog that's going to roll in almost every night and roll out about 11 o'clock the next morning. So we're blessed with this maritime influence where Pinot Noir and Chardonnay really thrive. And even the bit of Syrah that we have growing out here just gives you this gorgeous, cool climate Syrah character. And I love that. I think for these thin-skinned varieties, especially like Pinot Noir, all of this maritime influence, all of this cooling influence give you that tension and that energy and that vitality to the wine that you get year after year, no matter what Mother Nature is throwing at you. And people romanticize the wine industry, but most of the time you look like someone threw a trash can on you every day, right? I mean, especially during harvest, you're full of grape juice, you got stuff all over, you're getting stung by bees, there's earwigs.
You're taking all the romanticism out of it.
I'm just telling you the truth here. No filter, Allison. And yet, you are crafting something. And again, the reason I love Carneros so much is it's not 115 degrees like it is in Calistoga. And I think the layers of the wine and the energy of the wine is really able to shine through, especially in Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, which I think does really, really well in these cooler climates.
Are there any signs or predictors that you look for that will help you determine what a vintage will be like?
At this point, no, because whatever you think in January, February, changes during bloom, which we're in right now in May, which changes during veraison in July, which changes during whatever, heat spikes you get in September. I think our job is just to roll with whatever Mother Nature gives you, be thankful that you're out here grape growing and use all your senses and intuition to really try and dial in to which block needs to be brought in when and how hands-off you should be with it. We tend to try and let the vineyard really show you where it comes from. We're not stepping on very much in the cellar or trying to extract very much. And it's very gentle winemaking. And I love our vineyard team that's like super high touch, all female vineyard crew, really detailed. I love these ladies. And I want to show all the work that we're doing, throughout the entire growing season in that final bottle. So our step is to kind of shepherd it and not just shepherd the wine, but to really shepherd this land so that it's thriving for generations to come. We have our Napa Green certification, our fish-friendly farming certification, and so really trying to, just honor, our soils, this land, and keep things, really ready for the next generation and
Sure.
protecting everything around us.
Well, in being one with land, I know you have a vineyard team, but I'm sure you spend some time walking through these gorgeous vineyards. Do you ever talk to the vines, to the grapes, or do you wait till they come into the winery and they're in the barrel and then you have a little chat?
There's a lot of conversation once they get in, but we spend a lot of time in the vineyard, mostly talking to each other. Like, are you seeing this? No, I'm seeing this. What about seeing this? And it's interesting because different parts of the vineyard behave differently, different rootstocks behave differently, different, aspects, the way things are planted, young vine, old vine. And so all of it's like this crazy Jenga puzzle that you play with every year. I tend to have more conversations in the winery versus outside. I feel like outside, Mother Nature's kind of taking care of things. They don't need me so much outside of our awesome crew that's working with these vines. But inside, there's definitely, a bit of coaxing and a whole lot of music being played just to keep everybody happy.
We'll talk about music in a little bit, but I'm curious if with your team, and I love that it's an all-female team in the vineyard, do you have any rituals that you have at the start of harvest or at the end of harvest?
We always kind of toast the grapes and have this original blessing of the grapes for the first bins that come in. But I think the best ritual is watching people warm up to actually pick grapes. So as we're actually harvesting, it's all hands on deck. So it's men, women, it's all these different crews. Sometimes it's 8-10 crews. It looks like a rave out here in Carneros because we're picking when everyone else is. And so there's lights everywhere and there's people everywhere. It's kind of amazing. And you'll watch folks start to warm up because these long nights of picking can be intense on the body. And so they're basically doing the Macarena in the middle of the vineyard, just moving their arms around, moving their legs around and shaking it to kind of get warmed up before they start picking. I love that.
So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think originally a veterinarian, but watching, but watching, animals that we had when I was younger, have trouble. I think I realized I should work with something that's not quite so alive. So grapes was a better way to go.
And when you're not working, how do you like to spend your free time?
Oh my gosh. We do a lot of cooking. We do a lot of hiking, tennis, anything on the water. I love Northern California beaches. I love Southern California beaches. In fact, honestly, I think beaches are right behind champagne in my most used words. Yeah, anything outside.
And if you're planning a romantic evening for you and your husband, what sort of wines, this is probably a given, is champagne, right? I don't even have to ask the question. But what sort of wines make for a romantic evening?
Sometimes we decide we're going to try and cook something new. And when you do that, you pull out new wine, right? You're trying a new recipe or cooking something you don't normally tackle. And so we'll pull something out where we're like, I don't know, like we haven't had very much of this, or we'll buy something where it's like, we haven't tried that. But a lot of times what we do, because both of us work in the wine industry, is we show up at a restaurant and just say, bring us whatever's delicious tonight, and have the sommelier pick the wine. So it's like hands off, no decision, your fingers aren't on it, and like, just give me your pairing, like give me something that you're loving. You know, you can get super in your head with some of these pairings or with some of these wines that you want to try, and sometimes it's nice just to let somebody else drive the boat.
I do agree. I do like when someone else drives the boat. And I think that's great for a romantic evening, especially since you both work in the wine industry. There's no conflict here.
Right.
It's
no pressure.
Someone else's decision.
Yeah.
So when you're living your life or doing your work, is there a piece of advice that you carry with you that someone gave to you along the way, whether it was a parent or a family member, a teacher, a mentor, a friend? What is a great piece of advice that you have been given?
You know, my very first real job in the wine industry was at Paul Meyer, as I mentioned, and Erin Green was their director of winemaking at the time. And she was a big, like, work hard, play hard advocate, where it was like, you bust your rear end, you work all these hours, you look like someone threw a trash can on you, like I mentioned before. But then it's important to celebrate. It's important to celebrate the wins. It's important to celebrate with your team. She really taught me that you have to back away and have that camaraderie and have fun so that you can continue to push forward. And I feel like that philosophy matches with something that my dad taught me decades ago, which is if you're going to do it, just dive off the diving board. Like, don't walk to the edge and look at it. You want to make sure water's in the pool, sure, right? You can see that from a distance, but if you're going to get on the diving board, just dive in. Like, do the double somersault, like just commit to it and do it. And I'm so happy I did that with this industry.
So when you look back on your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Oh my gosh. I love being both the winemaker and general manager at Bouchaine. I feel like being able to direct the business side of your wine is really rewarding. You know, how much does that wine cost? Where does it go? Who gets it? Like, what does this look like? Has been really rewarding for me, because as you create something and put it out into the world, if you have no control over it, those can be tough moments sometimes. And so I like having that additional control of like where this wine goes and what the story behind it is. That's been incredibly rewarding.
So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like
a pool without water.
Nicely done. And now we're going to imagine another scenario. We're sitting here at a very big table. All the seats are filled but one, and we've got your bottles of Bouchaine sitting on the table. Who from any walk of life, living or deceased, do you wish you could share a bottle of Bouchaine wine with?
You know, I'm going to try not to get too emotional, but last year was lonely. So last year, we didn't see our family. There, for many people, were losses that you couldn't grieve. And my dad passed away last year. So if I had one seat, it would definitely be for my dad.
Beautiful. I'm sorry. I'm having a Barbara Walters moment. Take a sip of wine. You're going to make me cry.
It's okay.
But he had the privilege to taste your wines, did he not?
Absolutely. Tons of them. Yes.
That's great. But yes, that's a beautiful sentiment. Thank you. Can we get happy again? Or maybe this isn't happy. I was going to ask you if you were going. Well, here's my first question. You've been doing this a long time, and I know that, we talked about vintage variation for a while, but you think we're going to be drinking wine in 500 years?
Oh my gosh, of course. We've been drinking it for way more than that. Yeah, I think climate change is a real issue and people are challenged by it. But it's such a community, and it's such a community of sharing. And there's so many incredible minds behind this, out of New Zealand and out of, France and out of California and out of Australia. They're doing incredible research. We're going to march through all of this, and where you grow wine might expand. And quite frankly, where you grow wine might shrink in some places. We're definitely dealing with climate change, but it will continue, and we will definitely be drinking wine 500 years from now.
We just may not be drinking it from here.
Well, you probably will from here, because this is a very cool section.
That's true. But let's say you weren't drinking wine from here and you were sent to a deserted island and you had to take 3 bottles with you. Which 3 wines would you want to take with you? Champagne, or...
No, I gotta have some Riesling in there. So some type of absolutely delicious champagne, definitely a Riesling, and
a dry Riesling?
God, it depends, because sometimes, the acid on those wines will take the enamel off your teeth. You need a little residual sugar. But that third one is tricky, because you want something that's really, I don't know, deserted island, it's hot. But I'm going to assume that I'm still moody.
Yeah, it's your island.
Yeah, it's my island. So I might just need some Barolo, and we can just sit on it for decades until somebody comes and finds us.
Perfect.
Right?
Well, we've come towards the end where now we play our little game where we pair wine with music.
Okay.
Which you mentioned liking music earlier, that you play music in the winery, so maybe you play the right music for the right grapes. But wine conjures up an emotion in us, and music does the same. So looking at some of your wines, I want you to pair them with a genre, a particular song, musician. You get as specific as you want. But let's start with the wine that you welcome the space aliens with, and me, the Von Gris of Pinot Noir.
Right. Oh my goodness, what would you pair that with, that Von Gris? It's so happy. I don't know, it's gotta be something bubbly. I don't know, maybe it's like Pink or Britney Spears.
Okay. And then we've moved on. I've got your 2019 Riesling in the glass.
So a little more mineral, a little more salty. Who's more salty? Who is more salty? I'm blanking right now. I don't know. Maybe you go Nicki Minaj on the Riesling.
Okay. What about Chardonnay?
Oh, Chardonnay.
From Carneros, your Chardonnay.
Well, but interestingly enough, we make a ton of them. We do an unoaked Chardonnay. We do our estate Chardonnay from vines planted in the 80s. We do a Hyde Chardonnay because Larry Hyde is my virtual boyfriend. I love him. Speaking of community and neighbors. And then we make a reserve Chardonnay also. So
Let's do your estate Chardonnay.
Or if you just want to be schizophrenic about our 4 Chardonnays.
Go for it.
You got to pick like a Depeche Mode, like a schizophrenic techno, or like all over, happy to sad. It does everything.
I like that. Okay, can you do the same with your Pinot?
I think so. Pinot. Again, we have things that roll from like really bright blue fruit, plummy, to things that are really savory and umami. So again, it's kind of a schizophrenic wine. For anyone that listened to a lot of Delight in late 90s, early 2000s, I love her music, and I think that's probably, that'll span all the Pinot genres that we do.
She's good at this. You're good at this. Okay, and last but not least, you mentioned you're a lover of champagne. So I just got to ask, the champagne you had, let's use the one you had on Mother's Day, your grower champagne. What about that?
My grower champagne.
I just like your analysis of this, so I want to keep pushing you on this.
Right. I feel like champagne does something really deep in my soul. So we may just have to go with Chemical Brothers on that. Just hits you way down in the feels.
Okay. You survived. You did it. You can go drink wine now. Now, I have one final question for you, 2-part answer. First part is, what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to visit and explore?
I have not been to Greece. And so I've been to a lot of different European wine growing regions. I spent a lot of time, in Spain, Italy, France. But I really, really want to run through different areas of Greece. We had a Greek intern when I worked at Sainsbury, and she brought different wines in that her dad had made. I'm pretty sure in their garage, but some of these guys were delicious. I can't pronounce anything, and I couldn't even read it off a piece of paper if you gave it to me. But I'm dying to go taste some of these wines.
Well, I think you should plan it. Greece is wonderful, and there are amazing grapes, and Assyrtiko with the wrapped around vines on Santorini are just a sight to behold. So while you're planning your trip, for someone who wants to plan their trip up here to the Napa, Sonoma area, how can they visit you? Where can they find you?
We're off one of these cool little side streets in Carneros on Buckley Station Road off of Las Amigas, and we're reservation only, as all of Napa County is in 2021, just to space people out for COVID and make sure that, that everyone is socially distanced. So you can make reservations on our website, you can call our phone number, and we have this incredible picnic program right now where if you really just want to enjoy the outdoors and some birdsong and some sunshine and kind of be left alone, we basically give you a bag that has wine and glasses and an opener and water, and we leave you alone. You can bring a picnic, you can hang out in the vineyard or in our garden and just enjoy with friends and family and not have anybody on top of you, and rejuvenate and get out of the house.
That's fantastic. Well, Chris, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack. I think that it is an amazing place to come visit. If you want to feel the wind of Carneros and understand what makes this place special, come to Bouchaine. You'll be surrounded by vineyards with a beautiful hospitality center and great views, and maybe you'll meet Chris. So come on up, make a reservation. And Chris, again, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack.
Gosh, it's totally our pleasure. And yeah, if you come here, you'll meet everybody. There's only 18 of us that work here. So if you come, you basically see the whole team.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.